Metal Gear, one of gaming's most celebrated and important franchises. While the series never really reached the mainstream success of titles such as Call of Duty, World of Warcraft, or Fortnite, the series left an undeniable mark on the industry. Whether you like it or not, it's not hyperbolic to say that Metal Gear and its creator, Hideo Kojima, changed video games forever. Simply put, we don't have a world where games such as The Last of Us exist without Metal Gear Solid. The entire stealth genre as we know it is defined by the original game back in 1987. And breaking the fourth wall and subverting players' expectations were in Kojima's playbook way before many of the devs that use it today were even alive. No matter which way you look at it, the series and its impact can't be understated. Not only that, but Metal Gear has always been different from most video game franchises, in that it was always intrinsically linked to one man, Hideo Kojima. While other series can have creative heads leave, their development studios change, and it's par for the course, nobody bats an eye, Metal Gear is different. From 1987 to 2015, Metal Gear has been the child of one man. Of course, he didn't do everything himself, and he had incredibly talented teams capable of executing and improving upon his work, but Kojima held creative control and steered the franchise for nearly 30 years. It's no wonder people find it really hard, I myself find it impossible, to imagine the series without him. When he left Konami at the end of 2015, that marked the end of the Metal Gear franchise, no matter what Konami tries to say. Now, you might be wondering, what does this whole preamble has to do with the title of the video? Don't worry, we'll get there. So, given what I've said so far, it's surprising that people often don't want to talk about the last game of the series. When they do, it's usually in the context of the fallout between Kojima and Konami, or how it wasn't finished, or how the gameplay was really good, but when it comes to the story, something that the whole series is known for, people just say it sucked, or that it was disappointing. There are many videos on the subject, and I'm sure you watched at least a few of them. For me, however, I couldn't feel more different about it. I think they had a great thought-provoking story in line with the previous games, and its much maligned ending was, to me, the perfect way to end the whole Metal Gear saga. Now, it has been quite some time since the release of the game, and the people who really disliked it might not be so worked up about it anymore, and might be interested to hear a different point of view, now that the dust has settled. So, if you'll indulge me, let's explore why MGS5 has the perfect ending.
Now go! Let the legend come back to life.
Yeah, okay, we're not diving into it immediately, but trust me, this is important housekeeping before we talk about the game itself. First off, don't worry, I'm not here to invalidate anybody's opinion towards the game by saying, oh, your expectations were just too high or something. This is not what this is about. But it's important to recognize that expectations do affect our reaction to media. Now, ultimately, a work should be judged on its own merits and not by any external factors, but at the end of the day, we are all humans and these things affect us. So I believe it's important to talk about the marketing before the launch, as well as my own mindset before going into the game. And since Kojima likes to say that his games start when he releases the first trailer, I think it's more than fair. Speaking of which, MGS5 had a lot of trailers. It had over 30 minutes of trailer footage in fact. Some would say that it had too many trailers and too much was shown before release. But then again, previous games had equally lengthy trailers. I want to focus on the tone of the trailers here. They are all much darker than previous games, with the theme of revenge on the forefront. We had a big boss covered in blood, the promise of going deeper than hell itself, child soldiers, etc. Not only the trailers, but the whole marketing promised the game would be about the fall of Big Boss. And with the release of Ground Zeroes, a prologue that contained heavy content such as sexual assault, torture, and gore, I think it's fair to say that a lot of people went into the game expecting it to be an incredibly violent affair that depicted the descent of a hero becoming a villain. And that's when I became really concerned about the story in MGS5. While a lot of people were excited by the premise and the marketing message, it never really sat right with me. Not because I was against the idea of a Metal Gear having a darker tone than previously, but because, and I'm not the first person to point this out, Big Boss never needed extra motivation to become the antagonist of the earlier games. MGS3 perfectly showed why that man would go on to create a nation of soldiers. His experiences in that game gives all the motivation he needed to turn away from America and nation-states in general. The game does a great job foreshadowing this in a subtle way with the refusal of the handshake. It says it all. Now some fans will go as far as to say that by the same token, Peace Walker, that was a direct sequel to 3, was also unnecessary. But they are wrong. While 3 perfectly showed Big Boss's motivation, Peace Walker showed the transformation of the man into a leader and a player in the world stage. It is in Peace Walker that the transformation of Naked Snake into Big Boss really occurs. And it's not only because he says to call him Big Boss at the end.
From now on, call me Big Boss.
But because of what you do throughout the entire game. After all, it's in Peace Walker that you build Outer Heaven. You recruit soldiers, send them on missions around the globe, build your military fortress, take in child soldiers, and even create your own bipedal nuclear robot. The fact that the Outer Heaven you built was in the Caribbean and not in South Africa like in Metal Gear 1 was irrelevant. Outer Heaven has always been more of an idea than a place anyway.
Today, call this place Outer Heaven. Big Boss's dream.
Only a few more steps to Outer Heaven. This is the liberty we won for ourselves. Outer Haven.
Sure, Peace Walker didn't tie directly into Metal Gear 1, but it wasn't necessary. The big boss of Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake isn't that different from the big boss at the end of Peace Walker.
We have no nation, no philosophy, no ideology. We go where we're needed, fighting not for country, not for government, but for ourselves. We need no reason to fight. We fight because we are needed. We will be the deterrent for those with no other recourse. We are soldiers without borders, our purpose defined by the era we live in. We will sometimes have to sell ourselves and services. If the times demand it, we'll be revolutionaries, criminals, terrorists, and yes, we may all be headed straight to hell. But what better place for us than this? It is our only home, our heaven, and our hell. This is utter heaven.
And just to illustrate once again the importance of Peace Walker, I'm gonna use another example. Let's think of Batman for a second here. You can say that Batman was born the moment that Bruce Wayne witnessed the murder of his parents. It was that trauma that created him. And you would be right. But the whole process of him training, preparing, and eventually donning the cape and starting to fight crime is also an important part of the creation of Batman. Because it's there that the boy with the trauma turns into the vigilante. It's an important part because it's there when idealism meets reality and where conflict is born, and it's exactly what happens in Peace Walker. I hope everything I said has stressed enough how much of an important piece that game was and why the marketing for 5 left me cold. Big Boss didn't need to fall to justify him being the villain of the earlier games. He was one mostly because he was in opposition to the United States, and since you play as the American agent, he became your antagonist. In Metal Gear 2, Big Boss is taking a much more active role in world events, and he's threatening the global order, but that isn't a big departure from the end of Peace Walker at all. The core of the character between the two games is still the same. The series has always been pretty good at moral ambiguity, and showing antagonists that make good points about the global status quo, and having you almost always fighting to protect the status quo on behalf of arguably just as bad or worse figures. The antagonists had to be stopped, but you're never supposed to leave the game thinking that the world is doing great now. Metal Gear has always tried to make its players think, and that was one of the ways it did that. So yeah, I never liked the premise. To me, it just seemed like a unnecessary retread of Peace Walker with an angrier and edgier Big Boss that would shoot kids, I guess. Not to mention, revenge is one of the most overused themes in video game stories, so it sounded like a pretty bad idea overall. And it wouldn't add much to the series, and it would just lessen the character of Big Boss. During the whole lead up to the game, I wasn't really looking forward to the story, to be honest. I still wanted to play the game, of course, but mostly because of the gameplay. Funnily enough though, it seems my pre-release impressions of the game were the takeaway a lot of people had from Phantom Pain. Meanwhile, after I actually played the game, my takeaway from the story was the complete opposite. So what did Kojima do to have me completely turn around on a story I was already pretty sure I wasn't gonna like? Well, it comes down to the final controversial twist that is the combination of the entire game's story and, in a way, of the series as a whole. So it's about time. Let's get into the meat of it.
Kept you waiting, huh?
Now, before I get into the twist proper, let me address the one thing I don't really like about it, and that is how it's revealed. It's no secret that MGSV has both a unique structure as well as having a troubled development, and we'll address both of these in detail another time. But that might also explain why the game has you replay the prologue to get to the twist. Now, it makes some sense for you to replay the intro given the context, but having a big revelation right at the beginning and then being forced to play a very slow-paced mission that is also a tutorial just so you can get to the rest of the story is frustrating at best and saps much of the momentum of the twist. It would have been better to just have a big cutscene, but that likely wasn't possible due to the two reasons I talked about. But if there is one criticism I agree with about the ending, this was it. That out of the way, let's quickly touch on a common complaint tossed around when the game came out, and then we'll get into the core of the video. One of the arguments you'd often hear against the ending was this notion that there wasn't enough build-up for it, which should be ridiculous on its face, but let me just address this quickly. There was absolutely enough build-up for the twist, even from the first trailer of the game. In fact, long before the game even came out, people were already making theories that you wouldn't be playing as Big Boss. In the game itself, there are numerous moments that indicated that you're in fact not playing as Jack from MGS3. So, the build-up and the hints were certainly there for anyone paying attention.
Boss, we've got the results of Eli's genetic tests. We can finally put this worry behind us.
We used the PCR technique and conducted DNA fingerprinting of the copied DNA sequences. Neither is mainstream science yet, but the concepts and procedures are sound. Both tests say there is 0% chance that the two of you are blood relatives, meaning the results are negative. He's not your son, nor is he your clone. He's just another person.
The Soviet Union has been researching military applications for psi phenomena. Psi? Things like psychokinesis and ESP, extrasensory perception.
You mean moving objects without touching them? Knowing what card somebody's holding up? Psychic powers? Come on. I thought that was just another bunch of disinformation aimed at the West.
Just bear with me a second. One type of ESP is telepathy. It's the ability to know another person's thoughts through non-verbal means.
You're saying Eli read our minds?
It's the only idea that doesn't involve someone getting to him.
Ocelot.
Look, psi research isn't some hocus pocus. It's all evidence-based, scientific...
There's gotta be another explanation. Maybe one of the kids stuck a note to your back.
I hope that's the case. But I am convinced that they have, or Eli has, a connection to some force we have yet to identify. You better watch yourself, boss.
How am I supposed to do that?
Sad. So sad. A host of sorrows. And you are one of them.
Read him, sir.
That Soviet soldier in the Green Beret is speaking English. Must be a language specialist. With him on our side, we'd be capable of Russian interpretation support. Try and extract him.
By the way, your Russian is superb. Where did you learn to speak it? From my mentor.
The big issue people seem to have with the twist is the character of Venom himself. The problem being that he didn't have a build-up as his own character and that he's just another random soldier. People often then compare the twist of Phantom Pain with the Raiden twist in MGS2, saying how the latter is a successful protagonist switch, arguing that MGS5 just has a twist for the sake of it. That's an interesting comparison given how much backlash both twists got. People seem to forget that now, but fans hated Raiden, to the point the entire character of Rykov in MGS3 was there to basically cater to the fan hate. But it's important to note that the only thing that these twists have in common is that you are not playing as who you thought you were, and that the character you're playing as is a cipher for the player. Keep that in mind, because we will be coming back to it later. The purpose of both twists, however, are completely different. The twist in MGS5 is not the same as in 2, and it's not trying to be. But let's stick with the MGS2 comparison just for a second. One of the purposes of the switch in that game was to elevate the character of Solid Snake. The game dedicates many scenes to point out how awesome he is in comparison to Raiden, and almost taunts the player that he's not playing as the series protagonist. In MGS5, the purpose of the twist is the opposite, is to tear down the legend of Big Boss. With the introduction of Venom, the figure of Big Boss is automatically diminished, simply by having a character that can perform all or nearly all the feats that were previously reserved for the quote-unquote best soldier in the world. Well, all of a sudden he doesn't sound so special anymore, right? People took issue with the fact that some random soldier could match Big Boss, but both in Peace Walker and Phantom Pain, you can get soldiers that surpass Boss in all stats. We might have just dismissed that as just a gameplay thing, but the series has tried to stress time and time again that legends and heroes are not something to be trusted.
Oh, just what I'd expect from the legendary Solid Snake. You trying to sweep me off my feet?
Don't worry, you'll land back on them once you meet me. The reality is no match for the legend, I'm afraid.
Oh, I don't believe that.
You can say that because you're a legend, a hero. I'm Jack the Ripper, a dirty reminder, A terrible mistake.
Legends don't mean a whole lot. I was just a name to exploit. Just like you.
People will remember only the good part, the right part of what you did.
There's no right part in murder. Not ever. And we're not in this to make a name for ourselves.
Ever since the attack on your unit 9 years ago, the name Big Boss has become known the world over.
What do you mean?
Those of your men who survived traveled far and wide. They fought throughout the world. In fact, they're part of the reason we have all these PFs now. Every one of them suffered their own phantom pain from losing you. Talking about you wherever they went helped to heal their wounds. Your actions and words, your legend, has been told on every battlefield they've set foot on. Obviously, as the tales have spread, the truth's been distorted, painted over.
Zero decided that in order to lead the people, we needed a special kind of icon. So we turned to Big Boss, the last son of the boss. He shared more of her life than anyone else. It was Big Boss, the true heir to her legacy, who was best suited to play this role. Zero elevated Big Boss, the hero who saved the world, to the status of an idol. The truth behind Big Boss became riddled with exaggeration, misrepresentation, and outright lies. Zero disseminated these stories among the masses and gathered the rich and powerful to his banner.
Are you the Snake? They said you were dead.
No, not me. There are still too many things I need to do.
Snake, you're a legend, and that's why I need to ask you this.
Legend? A legend is nothing but fiction. Someone tells it, someone else remembers. Everybody passes it on.
People need heroes. Zero wanted to create a messiah. A legend that would never die.
Big Boss has always been more important as a symbol than anything else, both in the Metal Gear universe as a legendary soldier, and in our world as an iconic character. In fact, Big Boss is the most important character in the entire Metal Gear franchise. He's in a way the linchpin that holds the entire series together. His presence and influence is felt throughout the stories of all of the games, even if he isn't present. But in both places, he's a constructed legend, one that only exists if people believe in it. If we go back to the beginning, to what first defined his character, it was the first major twist in the entire series, back in Metal Gear 1, where it's revealed that he betrayed the player, and in MGS5, he does it again. What really makes the ending work when it comes to the character of Big Boss, and gives it meaning, is the thing that a lot of people disliked, the fact that Venom is just another soldier. It's that particular revelation that really has the most impact and that recontextualizes Big Boss's entire character. For us to understand why that is so important, we just need to have a look at Diamond Dogs for a moment. This might not be apparent right away, but Diamond Dogs is basically a cult dedicated to the worship of Big Boss. They all have extreme loyalty and reverence for their leader, and as Ocelot puts it, they all fell in love with the legend. And why did that happen? Why were all these people so drawn into this cult? Well, actually, I think Huey put it best.
Just look at that dog! No! You named him D-Dog, but it's obvious anyone could see that's a wolf! Because you're all a bunch of wild dogs! You wanted to believe he was too, to feel some connection, to fight your loneliness. You wanted something to cling to prove you deserve to be alive. You wanted to forget the death, your sins, so you'd cling on to dogs, or wolves, or even Big Boss. The boss is the same, isn't he? Every one of you is alone. That's why you suspect your own. I know, because I do the same. I'm one of you too. Alone.
A ruler's greatest wealth is not money or land. It is the number of individuals under his control. Subjects who work, consume, are there to be used as pawns in war. For a capitalist ruler, his people's power becomes his power. You are the same with your diamond dogs. You spin it with your speeches, but what you're doing is bringing as much talent as you can into your little domain. Every person another feather in your cap. Yes, since ancient times, every civilization's ruler has had the same idea. When people unite under one will, they become stronger than the sum of their parts. And the one will is the ruler's will. And what do rulers use to bring people together? Language.
Every era needs its symbols to control the people, whether it be the stars and stripes, or the hammer and sickle.
The moment any truth is passed on, it starts turning into fiction. The problem is, fiction inspires people more than facts. To the world, you're now the legendary mercenary Big Boss.
Zero transformed Big Boss into an icon, neither living nor dead.
Sounds almost like a religion.
It's because of this that despite most of them being kidnapped, imprisoned, and even tortured, they all become loyal and ready to give their lives for their boss. And nowhere is this mindset more evident than in the Shining Lights mission. As with everything in MGS5, it seems not everybody liked that mission because they didn't feel they had an emotional attachment to the soldiers there. Personally, I think it's very affectionate emotionally, and it's one of the few times in a video game that I felt sick to my stomach as a player by what I had to do. The emotion of the scene, however, doesn't come from the loss of incredibly developed characters like Grey Cat or Flying Hippo. Rather, it's the opposite. It's the attachment all those soldiers have towards you that make the whole section work. The soldiers in the quarantine are disoriented, they don't know what's happening to them, and when you arrive, they see hope, they see their leader, their hero, coming to save them. The real tragedy of the scene, and what really knocks it out of the park for me, comes when all that hope turns into despair, as that hero has to kill each and every one of them. Some feel betrayed and lash out in anger, while others trust in you so much they're willing to die at your command. The game makes you first walk in, give them all hope, and then makes you take it all away. That's what makes that mission so powerful. It's about all these people that you don't even know the name of, and that you have literally just treated as a resource throughout the whole game, having such strong feelings towards you, and then suffering their ultimate fate.
Kill us! I believed in you, boss!
I'm sorry.
The full picture of the tragedy, however, only becomes clear once you finish the game and you realize that the big boss all those soldiers worshipped didn't even know they existed. Those soldiers who were willing to die if it was by the hand of the legendary big boss didn't even get that. They were killed by a doppelganger, by another soldier just like them. A soldier that idolized the legend and would take any mission his boss commanded. And it's in how this soldier is treated that Big Boss's story comes full circle. So, for a bit of a refresher, let's go back to the beginning. What created Big Boss? It was his betrayal by the hands of the US government, right? Yes, but that's not all of it. At the end of MGS3, when he rejects the handshake, he's not only turning his back on America, He's turning his back on the entire system of nation-states, on the idea of a country basically. The worst part of the betrayal was how impersonal it was. After the boss had given so much to the US, they simply saw her as a tool and discarded her when she outlived her usefulness. They didn't even initially intend to do that, but since circumstances called for it, they didn't hesitate. And they went a step further. They were fine with tarnishing her reputation and in essence stealing her identity. She was a hero, a patriot, but would go down in history as a war criminal and a traitor. Because that's what the United States needed her to be at the time. When Big Boss first created MSF, that was what he was trying to get away from, to create a refuge where soldiers would be able to fight outside the logic of nation-states. But by the end of Peace Walker, when he's attacked by Cypher, he realizes that he can't live apart from the world. His very existence creates ripples. He can't ignore it because the world won't ignore him. And Snake was never a man to simply give up. He would fight back.
We are going to be fighting the biggest beast of all. The Times. 10 years ago, the Times rejected the boss and killed her. And now, we're the ones being tested. Will the Times erase us? Or work with us? It's gonna be a lonely battle. No good or evil. No winners or losers. Business will have to wait. The question we have to ask ourselves now is, can we survive long enough to see the 21st century?
I'm with you, boss. We'll see how it turns out together.
Up to this point, everything's fine, but what really changes things is the attack on Mother Base. When he wakes up from the coma, it's a different world. A world he's gonna have to fight against if his idea of Outer Heaven is going to succeed. And so he turned to Venom. It's here that all the characteristics of Venom come together. Who was he? He was a soldier, loyal to the end. Why was he chosen? By circumstances. Because he was there. Because he was available. And what did Big Boss do to him? He stripped Venom of his identity, even his face. People complained that Venom didn't have much of a personality, and of course he didn't. It was taken away from him by Big Boss. And after all of that, he's sent to the world as a decoy, basically to take a bullet for him. Bearing in mind that Venom had already saved Snake's life during the helicopter crash, literally losing an arm for him. And why did Big Boss do all this? For the greater good, for Outer Heaven.
The real Big Boss is working separately from us to create his new nation.
New nation?
A military nation above and apart from all. The true Outer Heaven. Something created to maintain world balance. Independent of the struggles for supremacy, for personal profit, the cycles of revenge between countries. It'll be an army, all right, but more. Big Boss is building a nation.
In the end, Big Boss adopted the very logic of the system that he opposed. What he did to Venom and what America did to the boss are in essence the same thing. And it's that hypocrisy that truly tears down the character of Big Boss. That was the missing link in his character arc. It's subtle. It doesn't come from a rage-filled man screaming at the heavens. It comes from calculating decision-making in service of a greater goal. That's what makes him a villain by his own standards. Hell, the very plan is hypocrisy itself. In order to defeat Cypher, Snake is willing to adopt Cypher's own plan. Couldn't be more clear than that. But it doesn't stop there. With the twist, it becomes clear why Skullface had to be the villain in this game, and not Cypher or Zero. Because like Venom, Skullface also had everything taken away from him and turned to revenge. The parallel between the two, however, don't stop there. Because if Venom and Diamond Dogs are the phantoms of Big Boss and Outer Heaven, then Skullface is Zero's phantom. Both phantoms were part of powerful organizations, had plans in motions, and had key roles in shaping history. However, both of them will never be remembered for what they've done. Their deeds will be lost to history. and they themselves will be entirely overshadowed by their real counterparts. I know a lot of people were disappointed with Skullface, but honestly for me, he was perfect. Out of all Metal Gear villains, Skullface is probably one of the most, if not the most, committed, resourceful, and intelligent. He explains his whole philosophy and how it was born due to his loss, not unlike the motivations of both Big Boss and Zero. And he worked for years to put his plans in motion and was able to upstage both of them, basically killing Zero and destroying Snake's organization, putting him in a 9-year coma. He set it all up so he could change the world and hold it in his hands, erasing the English language and ushering in an age of nukes everywhere. With this, he would render both Zero's and Snake's vision of the world null. And despite all of this, he gets upstaged by Liquid, a child, but one that is one of the main characters in this grand story. He doesn't get an epic battle or a glorious death. Despite everything he did, in the end, he's just stamped out. And the same fate awaits Venom.
You know, sooner or later there will be only one boss. There's only room for one boss.
Kojima hammers the twist home by having Venom be a character that we actually create. But he's not just a character we customize the appearance of and given a name, but a character we truly role-played as and shaped. And that's because Phantom Pain, more than any other Metal Gear title, is a game that allows for a great amount of player choice and player expression. And that ethos is reflected in all areas of MGS5, from the story, to the gameplay, to the open world design. To focus on the story part, just because you didn't have a Mass Effect style dialogue tree, doesn't mean you weren't making choices and shaping Venom's character. For example, you can choose whether to recruit or kill Quiet, you can play as lethally or non-lethally as you want, and the game will track that and change your character's appearance accordingly. And you can choose whether to pursue a nuclear weapon or to pursue nuclear disarmament. These might seem like small things, and they are, but couple them with the freedom of play style and the amount of customization you have, and you are able to create your own unique Venom. One that somewhat contrasts with the Venom in most cutscenes that's basically running BigBoss.exe, but by the end of the game, he leaves that programming, and it's in that moment that you get to choose how to finish the last chapter of the Metal Gear saga. Kojima was never a creator that wanted to spoon-feed his audience and tell them exactly what to think. In all his games, he pushes players to question the story themselves and reach their own conclusion. In fact, MGS2, that was originally supposed to end the series, had an ending open to interpretation, and that was the whole point of it, even if a lot of people disliked it at the time. At the end of Phantom Pain, we embody Venom, and Kojima asks us, what would you do? One of the reasons the final scene is so great is because of its ambiguity, because the answer I can reach can be very different than yours, and that gives us, the player, the ability to put the final dot on the Metal Gear saga ourselves. Would your Venom feel betrayed and revolt against Big Boss?
Big Boss can go to hell. I'll make the Phantom and his son stronger to send him there. For that, I'll keep playing my role.
The isolation screwed with his sense of loyalty. A rumor, source unknown, had him convinced that the attack 9 years ago was orchestrated by you yourself. That Big Boss sold out his comrades to hide from the world. He thought that's why you weren't at the base that day. He was so desperate to take us down, he built up his own PF, copying us in every way. His idea of the perfect revenge.
Or would he understand and follow Big Boss to the end?
I haven't forgotten what you told me, boss. We have no tomorrow. But there's still hope for the future. In our struggle to survive the present, we push the future farther away. Will I see it in my lifetime? Probably not. Which means there's no time to waste. Someday the world will no longer need us. No need for the gun, or the hand to pull the trigger. I have to drive out this demon inside me. Build a better future. That's what What we will leave as our legacy. Another mission, right, boss?
That's for you to decide. And depending which way you go, it drastically changes the context for Metal Gear 1, a game that, despite having started it all, was for the most part inconsequential to the rest of the series. But now, the simple 87 game is giving a whole new context and relevance. With MGS5, the snake eats its own tail and comes full circle. But how that last segment is filled is up to you. And I think Kojima put it best himself. There is an empty space, but it will not be filled. In this space, there is always a hero. Because there is a blank space, you can advance ahead. It is this blank space exactly that is V. So far, all I've talked about regarding the ending was in the context of the game's story and in the greater Metal Gear saga, but now I'd like to get into the meta aspect of the ending, because it wouldn't be a Kojima game if we didn't talk about that. Meta-narratives are all the rage in video games these days, but in all of gaming there's no developer more famous for using them than Hideo Kojima. They've been a part of his games since the first Metal Gear back in '87, and have been a constant in his work throughout the years. That's why I think any analysis of the story in any of his games that doesn't examine this aspect is incomplete. So let's address that now. But before I get into the meta-narrative at the end of 5, I want to go back to MGS2 for a minute and recap the ending of that game, and then compare it to what's happening in Phantom Pain. In MGS2, Raiden is supposed to be a reflection of the player.
Did you say nerd?
By the end of the story, Raiden starts to question the nature of his reality due to everything that happened to him, and so is the player after the fourth wall is completely shattered in the final act of the game. It's at that point that Snake comes in.
The memories you have and the role you were assigned are burdens you had to carry. It doesn't matter if they were real or not. That's never the point. There's no such thing in the world as absolute reality. Most of what they call real is actually fiction. What you think you see is only as real as your brain tells you it is.
Then, what am I supposed to believe in? What am I going to leave behind when I'm through?
We can tell other people about having faith. What we had faith in. What we found important enough to fight for. It's not whether you were right or wrong, but how much faith you were willing to have. That decides the future. The Patriots are a kind of ongoing fiction too, come to think of it. Listen, don't obsess over words so much. Find the meaning behind the words, then decide. You can find your own name. And your own future.
Decide for myself?
And whatever you choose will be you.
I don't know if I can.
I know you didn't have much in terms of choices this time. But everything you felt, thought about during this mission is yours. And what you decide to do with them is your choice.
You mean start over?
Yeah, a clean slate, a new name, new memories. Choose your own legacy. It's for you to decide. It's up to you.
This is Kojima using him as a mouthpiece to directly deliver his message to the player. That even though this is fiction, you can let it affect your life and you can take something meaningful from this experience. It's at that moment that Raiden, that up to this point was always shackled to the player, rids himself of that link and decides to go on his own, and become his own man, so to speak. And that's what Kojima is encouraging the player to do. There's more to the story of MGS2 than that, but on a meta level, that's the gist. Now that we established that, let's go back to the ending of MGS5. In the ending of Phantom Pain, Kojima once again embodies one of his characters, while we, the player, are addressed directly through a cipher. And what's Kojima saying this time?
I cheated death thanks to you. And thanks to you, I've left my mark. You have to. You've written your own history. You're your own man. I'm Big Boss. And you are too. No. He's the two of us together. Where we are today, we built it. This story, this legend, it's ours. We can change the world and with it the future. I am you and you are me. Carry that with you wherever you go. Thank you, my friend. From here on out, you're Big Boss.
He's thanking the player. But this is no ordinary thanks for playing at the end of the credits. This is a creator looking back at his work for nearly 30 years, and through all this time, like Venom, we really did help Kojima cheat death in a way. Now, this might sound melodramatic, but when people in the future look back at this era of gaming, they will know the names Hideo Kojima and Metal Gear. On a meta level, this is the legend he's talking about here. But while they'll remember Kojima and his mark on the video game industry, nobody will talk about the millions of fans that elevated the series and its creator. In this metaphor, we are all the random mother-base soldiers, and like Venom, we will all be forgotten in history, despite being vital for the series' success. Everybody talks about great authors and their works, but people don't really talk about the millions of fans that made those creators and works relevant in the first place. Nobody talks about Jimmy, who bought all the games. He's just another face in the crowd and just goes without saying. And yet, it's because of fans that those works have endured. But with MGS5, Kojima is giving us a chance to leave our own personal marks in the series with a game that allows for the most player freedom and expression. But not only that, Kojima directly acknowledges our part in this, and that we were a vital part in this series. As he puts it, this legend is ours. That is true in some degree for any media, but it's especially true for video games. Video games are fundamentally a collaborative effort between developers and players because no matter how linear a game is, even if it's a walking simulator, it still requires the active participation of the player for it to exist. And this is Kojima saying that to us, that even though we won't be remembered as playing an important part in the series, we did play it, and without us, there would be no Metal Gear legacy, in the same way that there would be no Outer Heaven without soldiers who followed Big Boss. And as Kojima drives into the sunset and says farewell to the Metal Gear series, he thanks all of us, and takes us with him. That final part really hit home for me, especially due to the entire Kojima-Konami fallout. From what little we know that transpired during the development of MGS5, there is one constant that we can point to, that despite all of the drama and harsh conditions imposed on Kojima and his team, and how incredibly hard it must have been to work on the games in those final months, the developers working on the game were told that they needed to keep working hard because they owed it to the fans to deliver this game. Which is why it was so dismaying to finish the game and then see so much negativity coming from the very fans this ending was made for. MGS5 and its ending aren't for new players. It's for long-time fans of the series, those who have been invested in it for years, who craft insane Fury videos and who start playing the games as soon as the first trailer is out. So seeing so many of these fans hating on the game so much, some even going as far as defending Konami and calling Kojima a hack, was really sad and was what motivated me to create this video. I hope enough time has passed that maybe the people who really hated Phantom Pain might be willing to listen to a different point of view and maybe reconsider their position. And look, I'm not saying that you have to like the game to appreciate the work and effort that Kojima and his team put on it, nor do I wanna put everybody who didn't like the story in the same bag as the Konami apologists. But I think this game deserved better from Metal Gear fans, at least from the ones who care about the story. And look, I don't expect this video to change the larger consensus on MGS5 story, but even if you hated the game and this video didn't really change your mind about it, hopefully at least made you think about the story in greater detail and made you question yourself a bit. If anything, it's somewhat appropriate that a game where one of the main themes is questioning constructed legends had so many fans questioning Kojima's standing as a creator. In a way, people did get part of the message Phantom Pain was going for, just not in the way Kojima wanted, and considering the series, it's somewhat fitting.
But you see how rumors and ideas about people can get out of hand fast. Once you create a character and put it out there in public mind, it warps and twists with every baseless rumor. And before you know it, all people see are phantoms.
If you made it this far, thanks very much for watching. I plan to do more analysis on MGS5 going forward with 2 more parts. Part 2 will focus on the flaws of Phantom Pain and what I think are the weakest parts of the narrative, because who knew, you can still like something while recognizing its flaws. Also, please leave your feedback not only on whether you agree with me or not, but regarding the format or the technical aspects of the video. Also, like, subscribe, share this video with your grandma, you know the deal. Did I do the YouTube right? Anyway, thanks for watching and I hope to see you next time.